Hi, I'm Jackie Russell here doing Talking Nonprofits with Teak Media, and we're here today with Daren Bascome of Proverb. How are you, Darren?
Well, Jackie, it's great to see you, and thank you for the
Yeah,
invitation.
so happy to be with you today. We've worked with you in the past, and we are giant fans of Proverb and all the work that you do with nonprofit and other organizations. So tell us a little bit about what you do at your agency.
But as you know, at Proverb, we really focus on the things that make cities great. We work with many different kinds of anchor institutions, healthcare, social safety nets, philanthropic, cultural. We also do a great deal of work with municipalities, oftentimes to drive new narratives to support tourism or economic development. And then lastly, we have a robust commercial real estate practice that's really national in terms of its span, and that can range from many different kinds of housing to office and lab to large master sites or even new neighborhoods that may be conceived and developed.
That's really unique work. How did you get into it?
Sort of step by step. Prior to starting Proverb, I had a background in exhibit design, and part of what's really interesting about that work is it's both very academic, and if we were going to make the Teak Museum, you probably know too much, and so it's really how do we winnow it down to two or three things, wrap a story around that, and then align various disciplines to tell that story: architects, writers, filmmakers, lighting designers. And out of that work, Proverb was launched. It certainly kind of set the tone for the work that we do today, and we routinely work with many of those same disciplines.
Tell us about some of the favorite work that you do.
I would certainly say that there's a theme that runs through almost everything that we do as an organization. It almost always lives at this intersection between research and strategy, design and storytelling, a purpose-driven place or community, and a real sense of vibrancy or belonging. Over the last couple of years, we've had the privilege of working with the city of Boston on its tourism branding campaign, All Inclusive Boston. We did the rebrand for the island of Bermuda. Currently, we're working with the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism on the semi-quincentennial,
Good
New
for you.
England
That's
Aquarium,
terrific.
yeah, and many, many others.
Yeah, that's great. I know that we've had intersections and have always enjoyed working together. And tell me, and specifically about your nonprofit work, when you work with nonprofits, which is they can be a different breed, all of their own. Tell me about some of the problems that you think they have in, coming up with their brand or their campaigns or the things that they hire you to do. And what are the ways in which Proverb helps them overcome the problems so that they can achieve the results that you're looking for?
So I would say that not-for-profits generally have large, complicated missions, and oftentimes there's a tendency as they think about the various audiences that they need to address. And those audiences could really run the gamut from donors to volunteers to civic leaders to potential employees or even the general public. Oftentimes there's a tendency to think that you need to talk to each one of those audiences differently. And in our experience, a powerful brand is almost always connected to a purpose-driven organization. And so it's really how do you talk about the work that you do and that sense of mission to each one of those stakeholders in a way that's meaningful to them. And if you're able to do that successfully, not only does it bring clarity to the marketplace, it also brings clarity to the mission.
So, how do you help nonprofits understand who they're talking to and what their message needs to be for different audiences?
So, in order to create a unifying idea around the brand, what we first want to do is to understand the audience or audiences and to really find intersections between sort of what motivates them and what existing perceptions they may have about the organization that may be getting in the way of the success of that organization. For us, we typically will use a combination of both primary and secondary research. And it's oftentimes looking at cultural influences, we're looking at geographical influences, as well as the competitive landscape. So I can kind of contextualize this into a specific example. Organization that we've been working with over the last few years. It's a very popular tourist destination that's really known for entertainment and education. And for decades, somewhat quietly, they have been doing both a lot of scientific research, but also environmental advocacy. And there was a real interest in, is there a way to really move that work into the center of their brand. And what we were able to do was to test that idea, through field research and wanting to understand, do audiences really care about this work, and what was a way to be able to talk about that really felt important to them. And then secondly, testing if this message would positively impact not just the sentiment around the organization, but their willingness to engage. And the findings from that really allowed us to be able to figure out sort of what moves do we make with the brand? How do we actually begin to sort of center that? What we found was that when audiences understood the research and the advocacy that this organization had, particularly when we connected that to, the planet and this greater sense of mission, what we found was that their likelihood to engage with the organization went up exponentially.
Really?
Not just in terms of their willingness to donate, but also their willingness to volunteer. It also helped them in terms of their brand as an employer, and other sort of follow-on ways in which that you would measure impact.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great. It's so important for nonprofits. So the results you're achieving are more volunteerism, more donations, more understanding about the organization overall.
Absolutely. And, and that also even sort of went on in terms of their visitation, so how do we actually sort of center that additional sense of mission? Where for the price of admission, you're also supporting saving the planet or things along those lines. So it was a real differentiator in terms of, how they go to market.
That's terrific.
What I would also say in terms of the way in which we really sort of test that level of impact, is through things like being able to track engagement with ads that we might have in market, or stay time on their website, or sort of which areas of the site they actually are spending the most time in. And so we're certainly able to look at those kinds of things. But what we were also able to do was to commission what's called a brand lift study. And it's a way of being able to look at the marketplace sort of before and after exposure to a suite of messages to see how perception may have shifted, And so what we found in the first phase of this campaign was that we got a lift of 8.7 points. A typical lift for a not-for-profit might be, 1.7. So, this was something that was sort of way above and beyond in terms of impact. But what we also found was that favorability of the organization increased by almost 10 points, and so, these are the types of things that an organization can really leverage into a capital campaign. This is the type of thing that you can double down on in terms of additional phases, because clearly, we've come up with something that they can continue to build upon and grow into for some time.
That's terrific. That's so important for nonprofits. I've heard you say too in the past that sometimes nonprofits don't understand that people don't know who they are or what they do. They don't realize that there's so much noise out there from all different organizations, and there's so much need that you really do have to capture people's attention in some way, and which is why your work is so important.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that depending on whose data you use, the average person is exposed to north of 2,000 to 3,000 ads a day. While we think about the work that we do, in sort of the mission-based category, the reality is that, you're oftentimes competing, whether that's for mind share, for funding, for employees, or just time and attention in general, and so as we think about how you go to market, oftentimes it's not just the unique need that you're addressing, but sort of how do you talk about that need and how that might serve a broader constituency or the general public.
So you're saying the action that you take, really, it's the connection between strategy and research and just general understanding, and then creative. You put it all together.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to talk about, say, for instance, affordable housing, which to me is a category that could certainly use a rebrand. When people tend to think about affordable housing, they generally tend to think about housing that might be poorly designed or not very well managed or government sponsored or for somebody else, and then the reality, if we look at a region like this one, we're oftentimes talking about things that are, thoughtfully built, designed, looking to address a very wide constituency, but also it's the kind of thing that really is central to the competitiveness of the region. And so, we're really looking at, the work that we do, but also like how do we really set our clients up to really leverage the impact of what it is that they're doing in the largest ways that we can.
Yeah, no, you make a great point that people don't really maybe understand the need for the work that you do and why it's so important on a larger scale. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and I look forward to working with you again in the future.
Great stuff. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.